Well, hello everybody. Welcome to AB Does Geography, and this is your final paper. So I'm going to do 3 recordings for you. This one is going to record a section on resources. So although this paper seems to focus a lot on tropical rainforests and taiga, it's really important not to forget that probably the most important concepts to understand is the relationship between population and resources. So I'm going to do that bit first because that's what underpins everything. The fact that we're using up the planet's resources and we're placing the biosphere, which would include biomes such as the tropical rainforest and the taiga, under immense threat. But I think it's more important first to cover the concept of population and resources. So in this paper, you will be looking at how the growing population is increasing demand on resources to the point where irreversible damage is occurring to a number of biomes that actually provide us, the biosphere provides us with a range of services that are threatened because of our demand for resources. Now the resources could be energy resources, like oil or coal and gas, or it may be our demand for water. It may be our demand for things like metal ores like gold and aluminium, iron and minerals, or it may be our demand for land in order to produce food and agricultural products. So also things like palm oil, for example, which is one of the main reasons why the rainforest is being destroyed, or our demand for meat, again, one of the reasons why the rainforest is under threat. Now you'll see there are an enormous amount of keywords that are on the slide. You can always pause me here and you can be checking whether you understand what those keywords are, but we'll gradually be looking at them. So I've already touched on biosphere, biomes, for example, already, renewables, non-renewables, resources. So what is the consequence of overexploitation of resources? Well, the consequence is we have a very unhealthy planet that is unable to regenerate because we are using things up faster than the planet can fix itself or make those resources again. So it's about how many people can the planet carry effectively without wearing itself out more quickly. That's the sort of concept to understand. And are we using things up faster than they can be replenished naturally? So are we making all the resources non-renewable? Just important perhaps to mention how important the biosphere is, and the impact of removing forests like the rainforest and the taiga. So forests are what we call a carbon sink. So they absorb carbon dioxide, and we know that we're putting too much of that into the atmosphere as a result of our burning of fossil fuels, for example. So by removing forests, we are increasing the rate of climate change because we are decreasing the carbon sinks. So oceans are carbon sinks and forests are carbon sinks. The other thing is we are threatening biodiversity, obviously, as well, because by removing biomes and by removing rainforests, we are threatening the biodiversity of the planet because we are destroying habitats. So obviously some very, very important consequences of overexploitation of resources. Sorry everybody, Lord Fergus has just come to join me because he can't be separated. So who is consuming the most? In the exam, you are likely to get a range of graphs, resources, data that will be linked to levels of development and to consuming of resources. So we can see on here that it is the high-income countries or the more economically developed countries that are consuming more resources, closely followed by emerging economies as well. So the major consumers are countries like the US, Western Europe, Russia. You can see them there in red and purple, but look at China, the amount of resources or energy that is being consumed in China, which is not surprising, bearing in mind everything is made in China. Okay, energy production is low in countries where demand is low, so in low-income countries where demand is low, they have what's called energy insecurity, and that may be because they have don't have the technology to make it, or don't have the actual energy available to them in forms like oil. Africa, parts of Asia, Latin America are at risk of energy insecurity as they are having to import much of their energy as their consumption increases as they develop. And an energy gap occurs when more energy is consumed than produced, leading to a reliance on imports. And that is when you are insecure because you haven't got enough energy for yourself and you have to import it. So quite a useful map on there. Again, you can always pause me at this stage and you can have a little bit more of that. It does talk about water as well as food and energy, but this idea that some countries are secure in their energy, food and water resources, and some countries are insecure. Some countries have physical scarcity, it's not available. Other countries have economic scarcity, which means they can't afford to extract what they do have. So what is the link to development? And I want you to reflect back. This is a paper that brings together everything you've learned so far. Don't forget people like Frank, who believed that the core exploits the periphery. Don't forget people like Rostow, who believes that all countries go through 5 stages of development. And then don't forget Boserup and Malthus. So Boserup believed that necessity was the mother of invention, that we would invent our way out of scarcity or difficulties in the future. Whereas Malthus, he believed that demand would outstrip our ability to provide, and that would then lead to things like famine, war, etc. So just be conscious of those 4 people as they may appear in this paper. So as countries develop, do they invent their way out of trouble, or does it actually lead to wars and things like that? I got a stake on there because as countries develop, people get more money, and one of the main things that change is their ability to consume meat. And as the demand for meat increases, then there needs to be more land that is given over to production of meat. Cattle in particular consume a lot of water and a lot of grain, and it's one of the main reasons why the rainforests are being chopped down to provide for the demand of meat around the world as countries develop. So just another thing to note. You are likely to get a rainforest question, and it may be about a country wanting to chop down part of its rainforest in order to produce or move to cattle ranching in order to sell to the growing demand for meat. So why do we rely on oil so much? And, at the moment, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. A lot of it does seem to be linked to oil. I suppose it's easier than some of the non-renewables. You can put it in barrels, you can ship it around the world, you can pour it into cars, and there's still a huge reliance on oil. Some countries are reliant on oil because they've got a lot of it. Other countries are reliant on oil because they need to fuel their economy and their factories and their power stations. But we are still as a society over reliant on oil, and I'd maybe necessity will be the mother of invention, and there'll come a point where we have to decide that we're going to move forward without oil. But it would seem at the moment we will do anything to keep our oil supplies coming, even if it means destroying huge amounts of habitat in order to access oil. So the reason we are dependent on it is because as countries develop, emerging economies like India, the demand for energy and resources rises rapidly. This means the demand for oil rises globally, because in poorer countries there is a reliance on wood or charcoal for fuel, and this then gets replaced by oil. But as you can see in the diagram there are lots of different sources of energy available to us. But unfortunately, there is this obsession with oil, and there's bound to be loads of reserves left around the planet, but it's whether we want to continue to destroy habitats and destroy the biosphere in order to get at it. So can we use resources in a more sustainable way, or is it just not possible? Is it possible to maintain or improve living standards without consuming more resources, or would there be a fall in living standards if we stopped importing such expensive forms of energy? I think perhaps like Rostow said, with the concept of the age of mass consumption and our demand for goods and energy, we will not use resources in a more sustainable way unless we learn to live in a different manner. So when you're working through this paper, remember always to be thinking about long-term goals over short-term gains, because that will be the key to supporting a decision you make when you get your issue at the end of the paper. Now, finally, in terms of energy, I think it's important that you can, at least for 3 different types of energy, give the advantages and the disadvantages of some renewables. So wind energy is a good one to have, because a lot of biomes are being destroyed for wind energy. It might look like it's a great form of clean energy, but actually there are some negatives to it. It is a clean fuel source. It can generate large capacities, and if it's onshore, it's cheaper. It's the cheapest renewable energy. If they're offshore, so in the sea, then you do need very expensive networks to transfer the power, and the turbines can be noisy and can be a danger to migratory birds. Solar energy, big thing down this neck of the woods. I just saw today, driving around where I am, say no to solar on our marsh or something or another. I'd get 3,000 solars, not here. Anyway, people don't want them on their land, but they are creating hundreds of new jobs, hardly any maintenance and no noise, but they do take up valuable land that would be used for farming, and the materials that are used in the panels are toxic and harmful to environments, and habitats are damaged. Biofuels, so they will be plants that you grow that can be turned into methane, into fuel. Okay, fewer carbon emissions and toxins than compared to fossil fuels. There is a growing demand, so it might increasingly get cheaper than fossil fuels, and the waste products such as crop waste and manure are used instead of throwing it away. Large amounts of water are needed to grow the crops, however, and this means there is a greater demand for land that is not being used for food production, and in some places it will cause deforestation. Now, there are some other bits to energy that I haven't included in here, but just look carefully at the resources and read the captions and the information very carefully, because everything that you need will actually be in the resource booklet. It's likely to be closely linked to climate change, so you think about the themes as a geographer that you should be thinking about, and that is resource consumption, population growth, the pressure being put on the biosphere to provide us with our goods and services, and whether there is a different way of living more sustainably by thinking about long-term goals over short-term gains. Okay, but definitely be familiar with the pros and cons of a number of different energy sources, and be really clear about the impact of population growth on resource consumption, particularly as a country develops. In the next video, I'm going to go over tropical rainforests and the taiga. Last year's paper had the taiga on it. It was set in Canada, and it was about tar sands. So we are predicting that you are more likely to get a paper on tropical rainforests this time, and possibly a low-income country or an emerging economy and decisions that they should make. But I will cover the tiger briefly in the next video just in case. Okay, that's all for now. Bye.